My name is Cathy. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And I'm happy to be participating in this year's Storage Developer Conference to share with you some of my thoughts about privacy's increasing role in technology. I'll just start with a quick overview and give you a little bit about the IAPP so you have a sense of who we are and our role in the privacy world. We are a membership association. We're a global membership association, and our mission is to define, promote, and improve the privacy profession globally. And we do this through a variety of ways. We have training through a multiple of modalities in person, online, through outside channel partners. We do events like this event. We do our own. We put on several events during the year under normal circumstances. We also have news that we publish every single day. We stay on top of what's happening in the privacy industry, and we have a wealth of research resources and tools available. And we also provide certification as you're familiar with privacy, you'll understand that there are many new laws that require that roles like Chief Privacy Officer or Data Protection Officer are required to have certification, and that is one of the things we provide. So just a little bit of the IAPP, like I call by the numbers. We have nearly 72,000 members globally in 155 countries. This number has gone up from about 40,000 when I joined the IAPP in early 2019 to nearly 72,000, which is very indicative of what's going on in the privacy industry today. We have both individual members and corporate members. We are a relatively small organization with just over 200 employees, and we actually power a lot of what we do, whether it's news articles, advisory boards, people who present. We have nearly 5,000 volunteers that contribute to our textbooks, to our training materials, and so on and so on. And without our amazing volunteer network, we wouldn't be able to do as much as we do or have access to the tremendous privacy knowledge in the world. We also put on knowledge nets, which is basically a community effort to try and help our members and others in the community connect with other professionals that are interested in privacy. And you can see we have training in multiple countries. A lot of those are through our outside training partners, as well as many active certified members and a plethora of privacy tools and resources. At the end of this presentation, I won't go through it, but if you download it, you'll find I've included a lot of resources to help you understand a little bit of what we offer. And I'll just reiterate, this is not a sales pitch. We absolutely offer a lot to just the broad community. You can get on an email newsletter and get daily updates of what's going on in the privacy world. You can you can just come to our website and get resources and tips and techniques that help as a non-member as well. So just sort of moving into the thought process of why I believe technology and technologists our roles in the addressing the privacy industry today are really rapidly changing is really well put from Julie Brill. Julie Brill is a friend of the IAPP. She's the Chief Privacy Officer at Microsoft, and she's been involved in privacy for years and years. But it really is the unprecedented speed and scale of technology and the changes that it's bringing. It's way outpacing the laws and the regulations and we're trying almost to catch up to understand how we protect individual privacy. Interestingly enough, this was the New York Times article this month. This was a New York Times article this month that just shows that privacy is really going to have a huge impact on our world and how we use the internet, how we use applications, how we build applications, for sure. And a little bit different than security. privacy has teeth in it. It has massive fines, and we're starting to see that out of some of the laws that are a couple years old now. We're seeing massive amounts of fines that are being levied against companies that have not been protecting personal data appropriately. So this is just a little bit of a background. I don't think there's anybody that will be surprised by this that's joining this conference. Every organization is in some state of digital transformation in the world. Particularly Forbes has published an article that indicates 70% of Fortune 500s in the US and EU are in some stage. 40% of them have major data analytics projects going on, which clearly hits in the space of data privacy. The IDC projects that we will be spending worldwide 2.3 trillion this point and the next point, where that actually tips the technology investment for companies globally to over 50%. I mean, that's amazing that more than half of our investments will be working towards adapting technology to address the digital age. And I mean, that's indicative of how rapidly this is changing. And frankly, customer data and employee data are at the heart of digital transformation. I actually love this picture. I have a really good friend, Vida Williams. I highly recommend you go and look her up. She's done TED Talks and she's done other presentations that you can find out on YouTube, where she talks about the personal data, the person data. So we have our own physical data, persons, and digital presence has evolved so much that we actually have a digital person as well. So I love this picture. It kind of really aligns to all the Fitbits and the Alexas and all the connected devices we have today. There are over 31 billion. By 2025, that number is projected to be closer to 75 billion. I mean, that's ginormous. That's our cars, surveillance cameras, our videos, our smart speakers, our phones, all that stuff. Just the ginormous amount of data that we are producing through a lot of the connected IoT type of industry today. Just a ton of data, a ton of devices, and the rate of adoption of new technologies has really enabled us as much as anything. The creation of data at the rapid pace is because of people adopting quickly. It took 20 years for the US to adopt the PC. Now we can't live without it. Now our phones are essentially, and our watches are essentially small computers. But as you started to look, smart speakers have been less than 5 years. Phones were 10 years. So we think about 20 years for PCs, 10 years for the smartphones, 5 years for smart speakers. It's just the pace of adoption is getting faster and faster. And every minute, I love this graphic too as well. By the way, this is from a company called Domo. They publish this, I believe it's about every year. This is their 8th iteration. This is called Data Never Sleeps. Highly recommend you look it up. There's more insights around there, but it measures on a I believe annual basis that every minute we are creating a ton of unstructured data in the way that we just live, whether it's Netflix or Facebook or Amazon. This is every single minute based on last year's numbers of how much we voluntarily create and share our data. I mean, we share our data frequently in exchange for some service or good. We don't necessarily think about it that way, but you think about the apps you can buy on an app store. And what they ask, they're free, and they ask you if you can share your location, if you can share your contacts, and you have choices in those things. But certainly, a lot of people are choosing in exchange for their data to get some service or some goods or something. And there are currently estimated to be over 40 billion trillion bytes of data. I read somewhere that that's actually more stars than you can see in the world or something. probably shouldn't have said that because I don't know exactly what that was, but it is a ginormous number. It is a huge number, the bytes of data. And of that data, and again, I'm sure many of you won't be surprised, more than 90% has just been created in the last several years. And the acceleration, you see more devices by 2025, more data by 2025. I'm sure that number will quickly jump to 95% of data has been created in the last several years. But you can start to see how this problem unwinds. Then on top of it, we've all just been through, quite, an interesting 18 months with the pandemic. And the pandemic has changed the way we think about data. Working from home, for example, COVID, how we do contact tracing, that had geolocation implications, health screening, needing to have employees prove if they've been vaccinated or not. Now, all these things, if you're not vaccinated, then do you have a religious exemption that you suddenly have to provide insights to and data for that you didn't in the past? And then, as I mentioned, remote work. Navigating, this is from a survey that we did last year, but navigating the work from home environment has been the biggest challenge by far for privacy professionals. Trying to understand the fact that we're in people's homes now, we're on Zoom. At some point we got sophisticated enough to have standard backgrounds to protect privacy, things like that. But there's just so much that changed when just the majority of the workforce had to go and work from home. So enter data privacy legislation, right? So I've just sort of shared a ton of the problem statement, if you will, and this is probably as good a point as any for me to say, we in the technology, the way I've come to think about it, we have helped create this problem. We have looked at big data, and I worked at a large insurance company in my past, and the sentiment, I think for a lot of us in the tech industry, was big data analytics, build big lakes, gather whatever you can, and we'll figure out what it is that we want to do with it. And some of that was for competitive advantage. Some of it was for certainly for operational efficiencies, things like that. Some of it was, if you get a free Fitbit and you participate in some company challenge, or you get $100 for this as well, you get $100 in exchange for participating in a biometrics. How did that eventually translate into what you paid for health insurance? Or you get the gist. As you start to gather information from people voluntarily, I'll put a Fitbit on, you can count my miles. Nowadays, Fitbits, of course, also talk about your heart rate. They gather your heart rate. They gather your heart rate during exercise. Those are all things that our doctors don't necessarily have unless we do specialized testing. And so suddenly we're giving away very, very personal data that could affect how much we pay for health insurance, or even if we're eligible, for example. So these are all the problems. These are all the ways we need to start thinking about data. And I shouldn't just say start. A lot of people have been thinking about this for a while, of course. And here we are, data privacy legislation. Over 60 jurisdictions globally already have very postmodern privacy and data protection laws. Some of those laws are not in sync with what technology already does. So it's kind of like the cat's out of the bag. By 2023, almost 2/3 of the globe's population will be covered. Their personal information will be covered by modern privacy legislation. And in the US alone, where we do not have a federal privacy law, we have hundreds of state level laws. We have some federal laws. We have child protection laws. We have health HIPAA, COPPA. We have privacy laws, but we don't have a blanket, if you will, federal privacy law, but 80% of consumers support it. So we see us heading in this direction. So I joined the IAPP in 2019, February 2019. Having been in technology in a a plethora of different roles in technology, from infrastructure to desktop to application development, services, and so on and so on. And I had an awesome opportunity in the early 2000s to work in security before we called it cybersecurity, before there was a CISO, before any of that. It was when the data breaches started happening. And so I after 30 years, I came to the IAPP and I thought, oh my gosh, I've missed it. How did I miss all this data privacy thing? And part of why I share that is because I put this together for myself and I continue to edit it and update it. And part of it is that reassurance that if you haven't been thinking about data privacy, if you haven't been really keeping up or catching up or whatever it is, you're not that far behind. I mean, you're really not. The IAPP is 20 years old. And until recently, there really wasn't a whole, even the privacy pros that our organization seeks to help in our mission were mostly regulators and lawmakers, not lawmakers, lawyers and people who were trying to take, whose job it was to put protections into contracts in the event of a breach. And so that was sort of, what could you do about protections? You could do something after the fact. So after something leaked, you could go after a company and say, hey, you lost our data, you owe us money or you owe us something. Data privacy and privacy engineering is really about trying to prevent that. So anyway, I went out and I looked and I said, what have I missed? So 1970 was the very first Data Privacy Act, Data Protection Act out there in Germany. And you just to ground you, the first 6 or decades, and then when you get to 2020, I've accelerated a little bit, 2020, 2021, 2022. A lot of what's happened has been in the postmodern world privacy laws. A lot of the ones you see from 70 to 80 to 90 and into 2000, early 2000s, those have been replaced or updated to reflect more of technology, because what technology was in the 70s and what it is today, clearly not the same thing. So you can see the trajectory along the bottom. You can see in 2013, 2019, just data breaches just accelerated like mad. The earliest one was mid 80s, but data breaches in post 2010-ish tied very closely to the big data surge, to machine learning and all sorts of artificial intelligence surges, to the shift from structured data to unstructured data, to the years where suddenly the hockey stick effect, if you will, the massive growth of data presence and everything. So in 2012, NIST published the cybersecurity framework. Not until 2020 did they publish the related privacy framework. So NIST has produced a privacy framework. It's only 18 months old. And I have a slide later. I'll show you how they overlap quite a bit. But as the laws have come in, as we've started to see this acceleration of data breaches, now all the ones in blue are ones that have passed but are not yet effective. Although I will say with the PIPL with China, that was a big one that just passed this summer that will almost immediately go into effect later this fall, whereas a lot of them like CCRA doesn't go into effect until 2023. So part of what's happening now we see is just ransomware is accelerating like crazy. So the problems are also tipping in, and the technology and where we're at right now is tipping into more and more protections and trying to understand what we need to do for data privacy. The last icon on here that I didn't mention was the privacy by design, mid 1990, I think it was 1995. Anne Kavukian, who was the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, I believe at the time, she published a set of guidance for privacy by design for engineers. And I'm going to share a little bit of that with you today. This is, again, I go back to where I started this slide. I did all this for myself because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. You're not behind. We are all learning. Privacy engineering is emerging. There's a lot to learn here. There's a lot of really fun stuff to learn here too, but a lot of how do we help our industry? This is kind of my call to action. It's time for technologists to step in and really help to turn privacy regs into technical solutions. And privacy by design is one of the places that we do that. Now, this is just a value statement, I guess, if you will, where we're always looking for how do we justify? Well, privacy is becoming a differentiator. Privacy is becoming one of those things that people are advertising. You see Apple and Facebook and Firefox. A lot of privacy engineering has been led by the tech industry, for sure. But in general, privacy, you will see more and more, I think, and you've probably seen it in ads, in newspaper ads, and online, on TV, that more and more people are saying, I take privacy seriously, and consumers are saying, I like that about you, right? So I'm going to shift a little bit and talk about privacy, security, and data protection. I'll start this by just saying when I joined the IAPP, and I said, oh yeah, I work in a privacy organization now. People are like, oh, security, I know all about that. Well, guess what? Not exactly. In the next few slides, I'll kind of talk you through some of the privacy principles, privacy by design, as I mentioned, and try and make some connections on the differences. So privacy, this kind of slide speaks to me about the differences. Privacy is about content. It really matters what that data is. It's about context. It really matters about what permissions you've given for how to use that data. It requires ethics and trust. It requires, when you have access to someone else's personal data, that you behave appropriately. Whereas security, data protection is more about putting the technical assurances around making sure that that data is protected. So if you think about security and privacy as building the wall around it, and privacy is about what is inside it. So can you get inside? Only if you have the right permissions to look at it, to access it, to change it. The standard things we think about with security, but also with data protection. It's about, what are the rules? What are the restrictions? Did I ask for permission to use it for this? And I'll talk about that a little bit as well, actually on the very next slide. So obviously these are completely intertwined. They go together, but very different sides of a coin in a way. So here are the key principles of privacy. First, again, these are about content and context, minimization. You only collect what you need, and you remove it when you don't need it anymore. From a notice and consent perspective, you do this as you collect. So as you collect information, you say, hey, this is what I'm going to use it for. Is that okay with you? This gives the owner of their personal data a lot more control. From an accountability perspective, this is a key privacy for people who control data. So if I collect your data, I'm the controller, right? I may process it too, data controller, data processor. I certainly may process it, but I may also give it to someone else to process. And this is a key for data privacy. Third-party administration, TPAs, third parties that we engage, and we send them data on your behalf, on you, the consumer's behalf. We collect it for us, but we also may use other suppliers. And it's super important that we not only treat your data with privacy, but we as the controller make sure everyone we give it to does as well. Purpose limitation gets to the consent part. I've asked you to use this to give you the service of insuring you. I didn't ask you for permission to sell it to someone else for the purpose of marketing some car to or something like that. Unless I did ask for that, by the way. But purpose limitation is, I'm only going to collect what I need specifically for what I've asked for, and I'm only going to use it for that purpose, essentially. And then user control. One of the key parts, and one of the challenges with a lot of our legacy systems today, is complying with data privacy laws means I have to be able to answer for certain laws like CCPA that if you want to be forgotten, you can call me up or fill out my form, whatever, and I will have the ability to ensure that your data is removed. Now, interestingly enough, I still have to keep enough data that says that you asked me to remove it. But that aside, I have to have that ability. And legacy systems that weren't built with privacy by design make that a little bit more challenging. So privacy by design, this was the law in Cavoukian, or the guidance in Cavoukian put in place back in 1995. And this is really where a lot of laws, like the General Data Protection, CCPA is another one, where they say you must follow data privacy by design when you're building your solutions. And so that really impacts, and think about the way we build, the way we design, the way we maintain, and as mentioned, impacts the way that we vet our third parties going forward. And these are again, not unlike the ones on the previous page. By the way, I did not on the previous page hit security. So security is a key principle of privacy, absolutely a key principle of privacy. I'm not going to go through confidential. It is about the walls. It's about who has access. It's about making sure we have resilience, that we can recover, that we have those things that standard security practices. So I apologize, I missed that on the previous slide, but you'll hear some of them again, because again, part of privacy by design is that you have secured it appropriately. But it's about being proactive, making sure you've built in privacy, that it's not like a bolt-on or something after the fact that you think about. It's by default. So I don't have to work too hard to figure out as a consumer that you are going to give me the default and give me the ability to be as private, to protect my privacy. It's about making sure it's embedded into the design. As I mentioned, it's not a bolt-on. It's something that out of the box, it comes with privacy. It comes with de-identification if necessary. It comes with the ability to make sure that the system itself will maintain your privacy. All the access controls, the usage controls, that we'll only collect what we need. All that stuff is by design. And it's not zero sum. It meets the business need, and it also meets privacy. It's not one or the other. This is not an either or game. It's both and. End-to-end security, no brainer. Visibility and transparency, that gets again back to that third party who says that they will protect our data, that your consumer data that we gather, that we give to a third party, we have to have the transparency from that third party, that they tell us what they're doing, and that we understand it, and that it's clear how data flows. And then respect for user privacy. And that gets back to the user is at the center of this. The purpose we're doing this is to make sure that we are protecting the user's data and privacy. Here's just a small example of sort of the difference between security and privacy. If you have an incident, security's reaction is going to be get rid of the bad actors, execute that cyber kill chain, make sure you have locked down and identified as quickly as possible how to stop the bleeding, right? How to stop anything that's happened. And we know this is hard. We know that it can take time even to find some of these things, but once you find it, immediately you're looking to stop it, to re-secure the premise, if you will. Whereas with privacy, the immediate reaction is who was the victim? Who was affected by that? Who do we need to notify? How do we need to notify that? Was it a financial institution that we need, to go after, some of the ones here in the example, or was it health, or was it an individual? Was it multiple individuals? But privacy is going to have just a different lens to that notification and reporting. On the flip side too, with that data protection and data by design by default, security is going to ensure that a system failure will allow you to recover to a safe state. Again, it's a little bit of reactive, but a little bit of planning to make sure that if something happens, we can recover. Whereas privacy is going to try and prevent that from the get-go. They're going to say, we're only going to collect what we need, and we're only going to keep it until we don't need it anymore. And that's a little more proactive as well. So a little bit of different sides of the same coin, if you will. So privacy practices. So why? This is the why. Why do I do this? Well, organizations. So let me just start with this. This data came from an organization called Osano. They have a technology that you can put on your phone to scan URLs. It's a pretty cool little technology. Not little, it's a pretty cool technology. It's a very privacy-driven technology. They're relatively new organization, but they put out a white paper that I found really interesting, which talks about the connectivity between privacy practices and breaches. So here you go. Organizations that have less rigorous privacy practices are 80% more likely to suffer a breach. If they suffer a breach, they're going to lose 7 times more information. Big deal, right? That's a big difference between whether or not you're going to have a breach, and or if you have a breach, how much you're going to lose. And then on top of it, it reinforces once again that third party that I keep honing in on, and that is that the average company shares data with over 700 different vendors. And we know in the tech stack, we know the tech stack is complex. We know that there's a lot of integration. We know there's a lot of fit for purpose that we select. We know, and certainly as we continue along with technology maturation, we find fit for purpose is a great way for us to solve without having to customize. We can configure things instead of customize. That's easier to maintain, right? Well, 730 different vendors are responsible for almost 2/3 of data breaches. Gets back to follow the privacy practices, follow privacy by design, make sure that you have a really strong vetting process for your suppliers. Or if you are a supplier, make sure you can differentiate yourself by leading with privacy by design insights and information. So this slide is just a little bit about privacy through the SDLC. And this isn't software development lifecycle. It isn't system. It isn't solutions. It's basically trying to be it's trying to be generic enough that it says whether you're planning, designing, testing, deploying, whatever it is, there are roles that privacy matters to. And there are different levels. If I'm an engineer and I'm trying to build out a solution, if I'm a data engineer and I'm trying to build out a very data privacy by design solution, I might need to know a whole lot more than if I'm a project manager or an agile scrum master or something like that. Just needs to know that those tasks are important to include and when to include them. So again, this is, I honestly don't care what your role is in technology. I think it's not if you need to know privacy, it's at what depth do you need to know privacy. I feel like, again, we went through this shift with the security, when security was their job. And I heard this when I first got into privacy. Oh, privacy is security's job. Well, it's really not. If you think about security as we talk about brand ambassadors, everyone in our organization has to understand enough about security to make sure they don't get caught with phishing campaigns, or they don't send out social security numbers or whatever individual identification numbers accidentally or on purpose. They understand enough. Privacy is there too. Everyone needs to understand it to a certain extent. Everyone in tech needs to be able to build to it. Whether you're an architect or a UI, another one I like to mention is the UI UX designer. That is a great place for people to start to think about how to make sure it's easy to understand privacy requirements and consent and at the customer engagement level. Impact, I tried to put together a little impact of privacy to storage. So if I think about storage, I think about you have on-prem, you have cloud, right? And there are some things that I would say regarding both, you should be thinking very similarly. When it comes to learning, as I mentioned, it's important for every role in technology to have at least some level of understanding of privacy, what it means, even to be able to understand as a manager, maybe that there's an investment, there's a return on investment to be had there. From technical debt perspective, this is one of the places I worry a lot about, because legacy systems are harder for us to then go and solve for, right? Legacy systems can't be privacy by design, but you have to understand what your debt is and use the opportunistic approach as you get rid of technical debt to ensure you're implementing privacy by design. Big data analytics may take a hit, or it actually may make it better. If you de-identify along the way by design, you can offer up a level of analytics that make it easier to ensure. Remember the both and, right? Data controls, data processing, again, back to your legacy and or new, make sure you have data flows. Make sure you understand how your data is being processed. Make sure you understand, because those are key things that need attention in this space. Again, make sure you understand how your vendors are doing this as well. And then when it comes to the cloud, there's just a little more. When you assess your cloud providers, make sure you understand their physical security, their virtual security, and then certainly locality, because where data rests, data at rest, where it gets transported to, things like that, those are things that are as well in privacy laws that you have to think about. There are emerging privacy models. I mentioned the NIST framework, the privacy framework, and the cybersecurity framework align. There is an extension of ISO 27001, that I don't care what framework you use, stay where you are and extend from there, but definitely lots of great frameworks help. Privacy tech is a new industry too. I mentioned Asano. There's a lot of others out there. You can see we do an annual tech vendor report. We have for the last 5 years. In that time frame, in the spread from 17 to now, you can see just the explosion of privacy tech vendors out there and how they're invaluable too. They're invaluable from a privacy, if you want privacy program management, cookie tool management, all encryption, all that stuff. And you'll see there's very seasoned technology suppliers out there, and then there's brand new ones out there that are in this new market. But lots of great stuff out there. And by the way, this vendor report is something you can just go out to our site and get. There's no membership needed. I love to encourage people to be members, but again, go to our resource center. There is a lot out there that you can get. Again, mission driven. The more people do privacy, the better our mission will be met. I mentioned we have certification. Here's another place, learning for multiple technology professionals. Again, how much do you need to know versus how much, it depends on your role. And you can see here that we have a whole set of modules that focus on threats versus data strategies versus privacy risk models and things like that. This is just one of our many certifications. And then, excuse me, the key partnerships. I tried to put privacy in the center here, just sort of as a subtle message that, again, maybe it's not subtle. Again, we are just a part of the privacy ecosystem within any company. And the more that we as technologists can step up, understand, and help ensure our consumers for any given organization that we're working in, that we're protecting their data technologically, because frankly, the contract that is a reactive solution, not a proactive solution. It's somewhat a deterrent, if you will, to say, if you do something wrong, but it's not preventative. It can't stop it. Whereas technology is really the place that we're going to have to solve for some of these things. And I'll just shift to, this is my pitch where I've talked a lot of concepts. That's kind of my lane. One of my colleagues, David Seitz, is an enterprise solution architect. He has been working at the IAPP with me for the last 2 years as well. He has actually been elbows in working on how to build with privacy by design in mind. He's done a lot for the IAPP in this space, and he has a session as well that I would highly encourage if you want to get from this high level conceptual pitch, go care about this, to really hands-on patterns, ideas, thoughts about how to actually implement the technology. then that's the place to go. It's one of the places. I know there's others out there, but I highly encourage you to either go to his session or follow him. He does some other stuff as well. So that's my little internal promotion for David. And then finally, I'll just flip ahead real quick. I do have a whole section, as I mentioned, of IAPP resources. If you go out and pull out the materials, you'll be able to grab those and they will point you to other places. And if you take a moment to rate this session, that really helps as coming from a company where we do, an organization where we do conferences, I know this is really meaningful and it can take a few extra minutes, but would really appreciate if you would take the time to rate any of the sessions that you're going to. So thank you for joining me for the last 40 minutes or so. And thank you to the Storage Network Industry Association for letting me have one of your slots to do my pitch on why I think privacy is important to technology. And I hope you are enjoying this conference and have a great day.